Welcome to Kardec Radio, where you nourish your soul daily. As you wait for our next program on the way to the light, visit Kardec Publisher at kardecpublisher.com to check out our latest books. Also, check out our Kardec Flicks, Spiritism in a Click. Just go to kardecflix.com. And now with you, our host, Angy Stewart, with the program On the Way to the Light. Enjoy it.
Good evening, my friends. This is Angy Stewart from Mia Inner Light, and we are here live from Miami, Florida. So we are here live on Kardec Radio, continue the study of another beautiful book, and this one is On the Way to the Light. We will be studying tonight the chapter 8, the Millenary China. And we will try, if we have time, and hopefully we will have the last 5-10 minutes, just to talk a little bit about this other amazing book, What is Spiritism? It's also a book from Kardec. It's not part of the Pentateuch, but it's one of the books that Kardec wrote. Beautiful book. It's not very big. It's actually thin. And it's like a summary of what is Spiritism. And Kardec created this book in a way of like questions and answers, dialogue with different people. It's very, very interesting. And we will be doing one item tonight. So just to start, I would like to invite all of you to have your water bottle. Have your water bottle next to you. We are going to be initiating with a prayer so we can ask the guidance from the enlightened spirits to help myself and my dear guests for tonight, and also all of you that will be watching us live, and also the ones that will catch up later in the recorded version. So let's close our eyes for a few seconds and let's connect with a prayer. God, our Mother and Father, thank you so much for another opportunity of being together online, where we can connect with brothers and sisters from all over the world and continue our beautiful studies of Spiritism, helping us to continue evolving, improving, and having a better understanding of life here on earth, but also of spirituality, because this is the real life. The life in the physical body is just a momentary passage, and it will come and go quickly. But the eternal life is the one that we will have. And we are a compilation of all the lives that we already had and the ones that we will have until we continue our progress to the light. So we would like to ask the good spirits to come close to each one of us, inspiring, guiding, and helping to understand and also to explain, so we can all benefit from this together. So be it. Very good. Did you like my background? Today I decided to put a new background. I saw so many beautiful ones. I'm like, my boring office is not that good. So this view is so nice. I would like to invite now my first guest, Peter. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Fine, Angela. How are you doing?
I'm good. Better now that I have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I would like to ask you just to give us a quick introduction to yourself and how you are here with us today.
Okay. Well, I'm with the Spiritist group Love and Light in Newark, New Jersey. I'm currently the president, have been for, almost 6 years now. And I've been involved with Spiritism for easily 25 years, I would say. And even before that, I was involved or interested in the topic very much so. And I'm very active in with different Spiritist centers. I remember you and I met at Inner Enlightenment in New York was when we first met. It was, I don't remember the exact year now, but it was quite a while ago. And do you remember going to the nursing home to do the Caravan of Love, for instance?
Well, Peter, it's such a pleasure having you. And we know each other for such a long time. And it was great that we met by coincidence a few weeks ago. So I was like, oh,
I know.
I have a new guest
Yeah.
Thank you for accepting and joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Very good. So now we're going to bring Yvonne. Hello, Yvonne. You are already a local, but if you could also give a quick introduction, that would be great.
Hello. Hi, Angy and team. And hello, everyone out there. It's a pleasure to be back with you. I live in Pennsylvania, but was introduced to Spiritism when I lived in Florida. And since COVID, I've been a regular participant with the group in Florida. With your group, Angy, I was introduced to you online. I subsequently met you in person a few years later, and I've kept in touch with you. I go to the Spiritist meeting in Baltimore sometimes. It's about a little over an hour from me, so I do meet with them from time to time, but I'm so grateful I found Spiritism, and it changed my life since then. So let's see what happens this evening. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you so much. It was great to meet you. It was wonderful that you were meeting us in Mia INNERLIGHT and the internet. You know, technology is a blessing, and I'm super happy that you were able to join us online, especially in Kardec Radio. So it's really, really good. So now I just would like to say hi to some of the names that I see here. So I see Juan Dorelis, I see Onputs, Up to Nuts, that's a very different nickname. And Millenary, New York City, I think this is Elder. Elder. Peter, you know Elder. So very good.
Yes, I do.
Happy to see you here tonight. Elder, you are welcome. Our guest from Brazil. Very, very good. So, my friends, I think the microphones are giving a little interference. We are trying our best to mute ourselves when we talk, but sometimes we have to talk together. Anyway, so if you just arrived here, we are studying this beautiful book, On the Way to the Light. This book was psychographic by the Brazilian medium Chico Xavier, one of the 400 books he did. And this is by the spirit Emmanuel, that is his mentor, was his mentor when he was incarnated. And this book talks about how the planet Earth was created. And all the previous chapters, they gave many, many, many details on how it was created. Jesus is the planetary governor of our planet. So he is our Christ. There are many Christs. And what Christ means is a Christic spirit, is an elevated spirit that already have this knowledge through so much love and morality to be able to take care of millions of people. So we understood about Jesus. Then we understood how all the modifications of the planet, how the first how can I say, bacteria, how it started the formation of the first animal cells. And we continue with the evolution. We talked about the civilizations from Capella. Capella is a star far from us, is a star that is very evolved, but exactly like our planet Earth right now, the planet Earth is leaving the trials and expiations phase. It already left. And it is started the regeneration phase. But we feel still like trials and expiations because it's a lot of pain, a lot of turmoil. We still have wars. But the enlightened spirits, they explain that for the planet Earth to go into the regeneration, all the difficult spirits that didn't want to reincarnate, they were in the basement of Earth, they had to return. So they are here with us. But as God is good and Jesus is our loving governor, he also sent a lot of emissaries of love to help to balance the situation. But tonight, we are not going to be talking about the Capellians, these people that came from Capella. We're going to be talking about China. Just to quickly let you know, but you can watch all our previous videos. The civilizations that came from Capella, they were extremely intelligent, but they were still very hard on their heart. They were not very loving, not elevated morally. So they were different from the ones that were in Capella. And they couldn't stay there. It's more or less like you were doing high school and you are not doing good in math. So you will have to repeat. You will have to do it again. But it will reach to a point that you cannot stay on the same grade forever because you are not evolving. So you had to leave. And that's what these people happened to them. They had to leave Capella because Capella was continue the evolution. And then they came to Earth. So we already studied about them. But tonight we are studying about China. And China was a civilization, was a group of people originated from Earth. That's what Emmanuel tells us. They did not come from another planet. So let's go to talk a little bit about them. So as I usually do, I will read the first little lines here. So chapter 8, Millenary China. After our brief dissertation on the white race was chapter 7, which was made up of the ancient Aryans, we must now examine the oldest three of all Earth civilizations, so that we may observe the loving and continuous assistance of the Divine Master for all God's creatures. Undoubtedly, the most pristine light of all Earth's evolutionary impulses is millenary China, with its valiant and resigned spirit, but with no sure course on the pathways of overall spiritual growth. So this first item here gives us a little summary of the China civilization. And as you can see, it talks that it is the most pristine light of all Earth's evolutionary impulses. So all the civilizations is the most pristine. We have also to understand that this specific book was written in 1938. 1938. So yes, China evolved a lot, and nowadays the China from the 38 and the China from 2026 is different. China now is super modern with the most powerful electrical cars ever. But we need to understand about the history. So let's go. Peter or Yvonne? Who would like to start?
Well, I could say a few things about the history of China. I'll try to keep this brief. There have been many dynasties in China. The oldest one was the Zhou dynasty, which was easily around the time period of Moses, so around 1500 BC. It lasted, I think, around 800 years or so. And there have been many different civilizations. I won't attempt to try to describe many of them, but China is, one thing about China that Emmanuel touches on is historically, China was isolated naturally by geography because of the mountainous ranges. There are two major rivers in China which had had enormous influence on the culture and the history. The Yellow River, which is in the northern part of China, which runs north and south in parts and east and west in others. And then also the Yangtze River, which is more to the south, runs a kind of similar path. There were times where I think it was the Yangtze River would overflow and have major floodings. This would have enormous political consequences and things like that. So the geography and the natural, the environment of China, the climate and everything, it had a profound effect on the culture. That's one thing. And we can talk about this a little bit more, but China's understanding of spirituality is also different from the West. I won't say too much about that, but I will mention that what you just commented on recently, Angy, that this book, On the Way to the Light, was psychographed in 1938. This was about 11 years before the Communist Party took over. In the 20th century, the last dynasty in China, the Qing dynasty, came to an end in 1916, and then the country was really in a mess. There was a period of warlords, there was a lot of fighting. Then the Kuomintang started to push the warlords out, and that would become present-day Taiwan. The Kuomintang was also battling a lot with the Chinese Communist Party. They were founded in 1921. And during the time of the 1930s, we also had Japan invading China, which was also quite brutal. So when Emmanuel was talking about things were a little turbulent, he was not kidding. And then, of course, China changed enormously after the Communist Party took over. In 1949 it was. And that's one thing. One other thing I want to mention, which I think will come up if we read far enough, is name pronunciation is different. There's the Chinese system of transliteration. It used to be Wade Giles, which was developed in the 19th century. Wade Giles, for example, the city Beijing, we call it Beijing now, it used to be Peking. And I remember Peking when I was a kid, hearing that name. But then what happened was there was a system called Pinyin, the Chinese transliteration, which was developed in the 1950s, and it was more accurate. So Peking changed to Beijing, for instance. And Emmanuel sometimes uses names that are more the Wade Giles system, which we can get to later. Another example was the chairman Mao Zedong is now called Mao Zedong, but it used to be named Chairman Mao Zedong, which was the Wade Giles transliteration. So I mention this because, again, when we talk about some of the names that are used in China, you have to look at the system under which they were first translated versus what's common usage now. The Pinyin system is what's used everywhere. It's became official in the late 1950s, and finally it got used in modern books and so forth.
Okay, if I might jump in here.
A Chinese expert. I didn't even know that. Look at that. Very good.
Yeah. And if I might add to this, so we're reading the Millenary China, which means that this is a very old country. And Emmanuel makes the point that it existed even before the Capella came. The Capellians came down to earth, and they had developed a well-established country with well organized socially, culturally, but over the years the culture became stagnant, and I think that's the point. As we get to this first section, it says that the country exhibited some stagnation. And when you think about spiritism is when we think about how we live, we are never stagnant. We have to evolve. And that, from a spiritist point of view, was what kept China from evolving over time. And as we read the rest of it, some other things will come out. But to set the stage, it's just saying that this is the first, it calls it the something, I can't find it here, but it's saying that it was established even before the other civilizations, and it was well established. Okay.
Very, very good. Very, very good. And just talking about this is we already jump into the next section. So we know the millenary China. It is full of culture and was already well established when the Capellians came here. So they were learning with each other, but a little bit different from the Aryans civilization that we learned in the previous chapter. The Chinese, they had this crystallization that was actually a problem for them. Not just them, but the Hindus too. So now we jump into this. The next item is the crystallization of the Chinese thought. So before we talk about the Chinese, there is one thing that I learned in Spiritism, and it was that only living in society we are able to understand if we are actually evolving and becoming better. And then when a simple example is like the monks that go to the top of the mountains, they isolate themselves and they stay there through many, many years in meditation, doing good and Zen, eating vegetarian. The spirits say, that's good, but will be only really good when they come back to the civilization where they belong to, and they are put to test to see if now they can act differently, more positively. If all the meditation they did will be able to produce fruits. If not, it was basically a waste of time. So just thinking about that, let's jump in the crystallization. So who would like to start? I will mute myself.
Okay, so in this section, they talk about voluntary isolation of the Chinese people, and in addition to that, Peter mentioned earlier, the geographic makeup of the country, how it just geographically it kind of isolates itself too. It's cut off from other countries, and in this. In its isolation, it means that they depended more on their own dogmas or philosophies, and they did not really expand, or they didn't interact with other civilizations. For example, like in here they compare them to the people from Israel, how they dispersed among other groups, and so they became diversified in thought, in culture, and finally they were able to. I mean, they're the ones that through which Jesus came, but also they were similar to the Indians in that they also the Indians they went internal, so they were more. They believed more in developing their culture, and they did not expand into other cultures, like I said, the Israelites did. And so that's what I got from this section, that they just did not expand their thought, and therefore they were not evolving spiritually because of, they had their own culture.
Emmanuel does emphasize the importance of contact with different people, and that we do evolve more when we are taken out of our comfort zone, you could say. And as I mentioned, and as Yvonne touched on, geographically, the Chinese were naturally isolated for centuries. And so they did have time to develop their own resources. I think it was around the age of exploration, approximately the year 1500, the 1400s, when they started to have some contact with people from other countries. And then there was some trade, Marco Polo, for instance, and stuff like that. But, and that did have a profound effect on China afterwards, as it did much of the world. So it's true what you were touching on, Angy, about it's like what we talk about in Spiritism. It's one thing to study Spiritism, study the codification. It's another thing to put it into practice. That's where the challenges come. And we can talk about forgiveness, for instance, but then when we're actually tested, well, that's something else.
Exactly. We can isolate ourselves, but only when we finally go to live together, we can prove that if we are really evolving or not. There is a little tiny piece here that's very nice. I just would like to say from the same item. So Emmanuel said it was because of its stubborn resistance that the Chinese fought stagnate on the march of time. Although, in making these unpretentious remarks, we will be the first to acknowledge the grandeur of its lofty spiritual expressions. So it's beautiful. Yes, they were stagnant, they were hard, they were isolated, but they had a lot of very elevated spirits that our Master Jesus, as a governor of the planet, sent there to help them to evolve spiritually. So the first one we will be talking is Fohi, and then we will go a little bit to Confucius and Lao-Tse. So let's go. Fohi.
Should I go first? Okay. Well, actually, when I was talking before about the transliteration, Wade Giles versus Pinion, Fohi is an example of that. Nowadays, he's referred to as Fushi. But part of what Emmanuel talks about in this next section is the contributions China made to spirituality. And one of the oldest and sacred books in China is the I Ching, which has been compared to, say, the Holy Bible, that it is a very all-encompassing book book. Interestingly, the I Ching started off as a book of divination, but what happened was that it then became a much more philosophical, and the I Ching developed over several centuries. Fu Shi, was credited with first beginning the I Ching and this was someone who was almost a mythological character, but he lived about 2,000 years before Confucius. Confucius was around 579 BC, so you can imagine how old the I Ching really is. And what Fu Shi contributed was he created the beginnings of the I Ching through, there are lines, 3 lines that are either solid lines or lines that are broken. And the lines have different meanings behind them. They're known as gua, and the solid lines are primary lines, and then the broken ones are secondary lines. Fu He created 8 of them because if you take 3 lines, which are solid, and you mix them up with lines that are broken, the number of combinations you can have between solid lines, a combination of solid and broken lines, and broken lines is 8. And so Fu He contributed that, and that was the beginnings of the I Ching, and it was a way of originally doing divining, but then people would use it as a spiritual guidance. So the I Ching was intended to be a guide for how to live life. It's very much a book about the way everything is constantly in a state of change. And you have the image of yin and yang there because the primary lines, the solid lines represent yang, which is more light, it's a more masculine, etc. And then yin, which are the broken lines in the I Ching, represent more dark, the moon, and the feminine. But one point that's made that's very important about the I Ching is whether you move more in a yang direction or more of a yin, if you're too much in one direction for a long period of time, that's not good. And the key is to have more of a balance. And so the I Ching is very much about change, but it's also just as you think something is like this, then there's a reason to subvert it, which is kind of an interesting way of looking at things. So you don't get very rigid and absolute about life in general. Just a couple of quick points. Also, the I Ching was developed over time. There was a king, Wen, who lived during the Zhou dynasty that I mentioned before, and his son. King Wen added more gua, or trigrams, to come up with 64 total. Originally, it was only 8. And then his son added Taoist texts because Taoism came after the I Ching, first I Ching, Taoism, and then Confucianism. And Confucius also contributed to the I Ching by adding, they call it 10 wings, but it was really commentaries or appendices. And Confucius said, if I could have 50 more years, I would spend all of that studying the I Ching. So it was a very important sacred text for that was really a way of life. Yvonne?
Sure. So I was just thinking, it's ironic that the Bagua, what I call the 8-sided thing, that it represents a state of change, and yet looking at China from a spiritist point of view, they were stagnating because they had not expanded into other civilizations, or they hadn't really connected with others outside of their group, their culture. And so it's just ironic that yet at the same time they had the I Ching that, was all about changes. So I think it was mentioned before, but I'll mention it again. So all these characters, all these people that we're mentioning here, these were messengers sent by Jesus ahead of him to like John the Baptist was sent ahead to inform people or to introduce them to the idea of this special of Jesus coming here on earth. But that hasn't really happened as yet. That they haven't really awakened to Jesus as the one that's the governor of this earth. So that's interesting.
If I may touch. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to finish
Exactly.
up and.
So this is like to be able to build any foundation, we need to have any building. Have to have a very solid foundation, very good foundation. So Jesus starts sending emissaries from all over the planet that would be talking about the same beautiful concept of love and forgiveness and understanding. And even if the oriental side of the planet never really met Jesus and had a long period to be able to discover it, Jesus never abandoned them. So the ones that we will be talking about are the ones who set this base. As you mentioned, Yvonne, others came before Jesus, even to the Israelite land, so he could fulfill the prophecies, even if the Israelites did not accept him because they wanted a king full of fire and horses and power. And when came that very humble Jesus, it was not exactly what they understood, and they accepted, and they thought that this Messiah was coming to make the Israelites the ones that would be dominating the Romans, for example. And this is not the mission of Jesus. It's a mission of peace and understanding. But I just want to share this symbol that's very, very well known to a lot of people. Even people that are not esoteric, are not spiritual, they talk about this. So this is the symbol of the yin and yang. And, another way of analyzing this, I know that the way, how was it, Forhi analyzed and he mentioned are the powers of the masculine, the feminine, and many other things. But another way we can analyze is that in every darkness, there is a dot of light. So there is no extremely evil without a little dot of light. So even the evil person, there is something or someone they love. Even sometimes they don't love the way it's supposed to be, but there is love there that is being born. And in all the goodness that represents the white, for example, there is a dot of dark. And what is the dot of dark? The dot of dark means that the forces of love already dominated that dot. It's over. It's under the domination, but it existed at one point. But now it's like minimal. So this is a beautiful way to understanding this duality that we are all there and we continue evolving. And it's starting within us throughout our free will to take the good decisions. We have less pain, or the bad decisions. We have a little bit more pain, but one day we will all evolve together. So very good. So let's move on. Now we have to talk a little bit faster because time flies. We need to talk a little bit about Confucius, Lao-Tse, and we will jump into Nirvana, because Nirvana was a very confusing way that they gave actually problems to the beautiful light ideas of the Chinese. So Let's go. Who wants to start?
Well, Taoism and Confucianism are very much about humility, among other things. They are about deference of character. They tend to be about treating others kindly. There's a lot of advice to rulers about treating people with kindness and not mistreating them. Of course, as Yvonne mentioned before, there are periods of China's history where people weren't doing that. It's not like they didn't have the knowledge or the resources. But there are similarities in terms of Jesus's teachings about the universal love and ministry of love in connection with some of what Confucius was talking about. Confucius does emphasize at one point, good for goodness sake. In other words, you're not good just because you have an agenda to get through, but rather because it's the right thing to do. And it's interesting that another important theme in China is filial piety, which is where you have a very strong deference for one's parents. There's ancestor worship, but there's also a great deal of respect for one's parents, one's lineage. And so there's an awareness of past, present, and even the future.
Okay, so I'll just, I guess we're talking about sort of nirvana at this point. So that idea of nirvana where you become enlightened and I think you have union with God at that point. So that's where everything ends as far as the Chinese are concerned. Once they unite with the soul of God, then there's no reason to do anything else. But as we know in Spiritism, it's a little different because we are ever evolving and we never stop. And even if we become an enlightened being, which would be millions and millions of years, we would still be working. We would not stop evolving. Even Jesus, he's still working for us or with us. And but the idea of the ancestor and that there's a union with God, that's why the Chinese, from a spiritist point of view, have stagnated because there is no reason for them to go beyond that union with God. And therefore, the idea that, you would have Jesus coming to as a source of redemption for us, that concept doesn't exist for them because, once they unite with God, then there's no need to continue to evolve. And so that's the reason why they have stagnated over the years. At least that's my understanding of what I read. I don't know if you guys want to jump in on that.
I could, the dynasties, the centuries and millennia of dynasties certainly created an entrenched way of doing things, a very strong hierarchical system, very class conscious in their own way, that didn't change much. And that's probably a major reason why, the turmoil in the 20th century and the Communist Party takeover was such a strong reaction against that. Of course, you two were talking before about how there wasn't much contact with the West, and yet, Marxism, which came, Karl Marx and Frederick Engels obviously influenced people like Mao Zedong enormously. Marxist Leninist doctrine is what he tried to incorporate, but do it in a way that would work within the Chinese culture. China did, of course, get exposed to Christianity, but I was thinking as you were talking, Yvonne, that in the middle of the 19th century, when the Qing dynasty, the last dynasty, was pretty weak, there was a war for about 15 years called the Taiping Rebellion. And the Taiping Rebellion was a very It was started by a guy named Juan Shichong, I think his name was. And he was a medium. And he kept having these visions, and he really thought he was the brother of Jesus Christ. And he started a rebellion against the Qing dynasty. And it went on for 14 years. It was a bloody mess. I mean, there was something like literally 20 to 30 million people dead by the time that thing was done. There were numerous battles. It weakened the Qing dynasty to the point that it would collapse a few decades later. But this was happening around the same time as the Civil War, the war between the states in this country. And but it was kind of an odd offshoot of somebody who really took Christianity in a very different direction. But in this case, again, not following some of the traditional values that was from Lao-Tse and Confucius and Taoism and so forth.
Yes, and due to all these items, that was this issue with them, because they understood. Let me lower this. They understood that they could have this bonding with God, and that's it. They don't need to go anywhere else. I do not study the Chinese philosophies, but the concept of nirvana to them is different for us. In Spiritism, we understand that the evolution is constant. Even Jesus, that's the most elevated being that ever came to earth, continues evolving. The evolution is constant. So one day we will be Jesus. I don't really know when. I'm so far from that. I don't even count on it. But one day, but when I become Jesus, Jesus will become who knows what. And this is constant, because also the creation is constant. God is constantly creating, and science proves it, because science discovered trillions of new planets. No. Galaxies. Trillions of new galaxies. What is mind-blowing? You can even understand billions, imagine trillions. And it's not planets, it's galaxies. Each galaxy can be really big, can be small. It's crazy. But God keeps himself busy, so it's fine. One day we will be governor of our little planets. And this is beautiful. So this is the beauty that we can understand and make comparisons. And I see here Juan puts a message. So Juan says, Emmanuel in 1938 talks about the need for a new spiritual dawn for China. 88 years later, that dawn has yet to come. Yes, Juan, it is difficult for the Chinese people, but as we digging, studying, and understanding, they are deeply good people, loving, enlightened. They had the messengers of light. They brought their beautiful ideas. Yes, they were crystallized, but they evolved. Unfortunately, the communist regime took over and created a lot of prohibitions. For example, they can't join a live conversation and expose openly their ideas. They can't talk about religion. They can't talk about anything. They have their own systems there, not really just to help them, but because they are regulated. They are heavily regulated, and this places boundaries that are very difficult for them. Yes, more recently, they are very, very close to the Occident in the financial system. You see, it's one of the very, very big competitors of the United States of America. And it is a problem for the US, but it is amazing that China came from being an agricultural country, and now is really very, very high in technology of many different points. But as the yin and yang we talked before, everything good, there is a dot of bad, everything bad, there is a dot of light. So it's this balance. It doesn't mean that Chinese will be like this forever. But for now, unfortunately, they are under this heavy dominance. But it's not a forever thing. We know governments, they come and they go. Some are more painful than others. And we hope that will be better for our Chinese brothers and sisters. We need to move on pretty quickly. And the last item is the China today, and then the edification of the gospel. So I think my friends Yvonne and Peter can bond them together, and we can talk a little bit. So we have a few minutes to jumping into our next book. So I talk a lot, muting myself.
Okay. I think that in the section China today, it's just saying since before, well, this was written in 1931. So before the communist revolution, they talk about how Japan infiltrated China and took over, I think, Manchuria or some part of it. And so the Japanese,
yeah, it was that part. Nanking was there was a very famous incident of atrocious atrocities in is it Nanking? I think it was.
Okay. Do you want to finish it up then on that section?
Oh, well, just that, Japan in the 1930s was Imperial Japan, of course, and they did try to, they invaded China, and it was a war that lasted until the end of World War II. And it was, again, a lot of fighting, fairly brutal time period as well. And but part of what I think Emmanuel was touching on is the whole foundation in which a country is set up. So Japan, was a very autocratic country at that time period, along with Germany and Italy and so forth. And China was very weak in that time period, in the 1930s, 1920s. So the Japanese were trying to see if they could take over, and it didn't work. But part of it, I think, is Manuel's commenting about humanity's hubris and what happens when people have too much power and think they're invincible. And sort of going back to the yin and yang idea, if you go too far in one direction for too long, something will subvert it and then take us back in a different direction. Yvonne or Angie, comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the fact that I think what Emmanuel also was bringing out was, even though the Japanese invaded China, that was not a good thing. And although they did establish, roads, and it was bringing China or into another culture, so to speak. At the same time, this is not something that this was not the way to do it. Not something that Emmanuel promoted and thought that this was a good thing.
Japan's invasion in the 1930s was very, very brutal and very violent.
And I think in the last section now, the edification of the gospel, it's just saying that,
Yes, every time. Sorry, I cut you, Yvonne. Well, every time a country invades another, It's very sad. It brings a lot of turmoil, a lot of destruction. But many times we understand also about the law of destruction in Spiritism. It is in the codification, and it is painful, very difficult for us that we see things with our eyes, not with the spiritual eyes. But Emmanuel also mentioned that the Japanese, even if they came in a horrific way, they brought a lot of good things for China. And the best way, obvious, is not that one. But if we also understand that the Roman Empire, who invaded so many different countries, but they brought a lot of amazing modernities to that time. So yes, it is painful, but like the yin and yang, there is always good and badness. So we have to choose what we are going to abide for. And the last item I want to read is one sentence that it is in the edification of the gospel. The sentence is, "A new day will dawn for the great nation that became a symbol of patience and perseverance for other peoples." So it is beautiful. And God is our good mother and father, understand the needs of each people. We are all different. Imagine we are born from the same mother and father, and siblings are extremely different, and the parents understand the differences. And they say, well, this one needs to be better control. That one is already calm, but needs help with this. So God is doing a good job. And one day, hopefully, even the type of government they are under right now will be more open, and will be even more connected to the other side, the Occident side, knowing that the Occident is not all good. Even Emmanuel mentioned in the beginning of the chapter the power of the weapons. That's very much what the Occident was connected in the 38, understanding in 1939, the big war happened and horrific things happened. Anyway, a lot of food for thought. And thank you so much for you helping in this wonderful book. It is always learning. We are always learning. And there are so many books that a lot of people never heard about, especially English speakers. So I'm so proud of Kardec Radio that we come here and we can expand the beautiful understanding of Spiritism in another language. So this book is this other one here. What is Spiritism? And we are gonna study a little bit about these items. We don't have much time. So the title is The Solution to a Few Problems by Means of a Spiritist Doctrine. And we are going to talk about the plurality of words. That's a different book, but the same subject. And I even mentioned about the scientists that recently discovered the trillions of new new systems in this beautiful world that we inhabit. So, Peter, could you read for us the item 105, please?
Yes. So the question is, are the many worlds traveling through space peopled with inhabitants as is the Earth? Answer. All the spirits have affirmed it, and reason states that it must be so. Since the Earth occupies no special class in the universe, either because of its position or size, there is nothing that would justify believing that it alone is privileged enough to be inhabited. Moreover, God could not have created those billions of globes simply for the pleasure of our own eyes, especially since the vast majority is beyond our sight. I think the last sentence is fascinating because science has confirmed there really are
Now,
billions.
Yvonne, could you read?
Okay.
Sure, 106. If other worlds are inhabited,
To you, Peter.
if other worlds are inhabited, are all their inhabitants similar to those of the earth? In other words, could these inhabitants live amongst us and us amongst them? Answer. Their overall form might be more or less the same, but their composition must be adapted to the environment in which they live, just as fish are made to live in the water and birds in the air. If the environment is different, as everything would lead us to believe, and just as astronomical observations seem to show, Lola? Physical composition must be different also.
There is a little piece.
Hence, in their normal, can you scroll up a bit? In their normal state, they probably could not live amongst one another with the same bodies. All spirits have confirmed this to be a fact.
Okay, so let's read the last one and then we can comment the three ones together. So, Peter, could you read the 107? Just the highlighted
Sure.
portion.
The question, assuming that these worlds are inhabited, are they in the same position as the earth from the moral and intellectual point of view? Parts of the answer. Various worlds are at very different degrees of evolution. Some are in the same condition as the earth, others are even less evolved. There are worlds on which human beings are morally, intellectually, and physically more evolved. Arts and sciences have attained a degree of perfection incomprehensible to us, and where the inhabitants' less physical composition is subject neither to suffering, disease, nor infirmity. People live in peace without trying to harm one another, and they do not experience the vexations, troubles, afflictions, or needs that assail Earth's people. Moreover, there are worlds that are more evolved still, where the nearly fluidic corporeal envelope approaches more and more the nature of the angels.
Well, what can we talk? Summarizing. What can we talk about these three items?
Yvonne, do you want to go first?
Sure. So we know, because the spirits have affirmed it, that that all these other planets are inhabited as they are on Earth. We know also that on these other planets, they are not necessarily in the same form, shape, or same envelope as we have, human form. And they bring up the comparison to, just as fish are made to live in water and birds in the air, on these other planets, based on the composition of those planets, they might need other requirements. They might not need air, they might need something else. And I think the last one had to do with and that on these worlds, each world has a different level of development, or the state of evolution is different for each world. And I like the last part where it talks about those that are on worlds that are more advanced than we are, where there's no suffering, no disease or infirmary, and everybody lives in peace. So that's wonderful and beautiful, and I aspire to be on one of those worlds.
I think this all touches on something that people have been thinking about for a long time, which is, are we really the only source of life in the entire universe with its billions of planets? By the way, billions of planets, now science has been able to verify that. They verified even more now than when this was said, 160 years ago. So that's, I think, fascinating. But also, when we think about it, if we believe in the immortality of the spirit, the immortality of the soul, who says spirits can't live in completely different environments, not just here on Earth? And what we can see here on Earth is very, very limited in many ways. I mean, we don't have the ability to observe life on other planets within, that are much further out there than what we've been able to explore so far. So there's a lot that remains to be seen as we go forward as to in what ways are these statements, how do they reveal themselves to us in the future? What will we learn more about as we continue and into the future?
Yes, beautiful, beautiful. And, when we talk about our own simple science, before the existence of the microscope, we didn't understand there was life in a little piece of in a little tiny drop of liquid. And we also didn't understand there were trillions of constellations up there. So when it came, it opened our eyes to understand life. So the concept of understanding there is life in other planets is very old, but a lot of people kept these ideas. No, it's impossible. But when we think, when we have the realization, Earth is a tiny little dot in this gigantic universe, why would it be life just here? So sorry, it's impossible. Obviously, there is life everywhere. But as Peter mentioned, Yvonne mentioned, there's different type of life too. And first of all, we don't have technology to arrive there yet. So other civilizations from other planets, they might have a better way of coming. And that's why there is a lot of gossip that others, people that live in other planets already came to Earth and already visit us. There's a lot of people that had contacts, but yes, maybe it's hidden, maybe we don't know. But the one thing we know for sure, life exists. And the one day we will have this understanding. A lot of Hollywood movies that talk about that. And we in Spiritism, we are sure life exists. So my friends, thank you so much for your participation. We are over time, but it was really, really wonderful. And I would like to ask Peter, as your first time, could you do our final prayer, please?
Sure. All right. If we're able to in this moment, let us close our eyes. Thank you, dear God, for giving us life, for giving us all the capacity to learn, to expand our awareness. Thank you, dear God, for giving us the capacity to love, the capacity to work together, the capacity to be instruments of change. May all of us embrace whatever change is needed. May we have the flexibility and the inner compassion to work together, to take fraternity seriously. And as we move forward from one day to the next, may we all work to make this world a better place. Amen.
Thank you, everybody. It was a blessing. I hope to see you all again next month another chapter. God bless everybody. Have a wonderful night.